Hello, and welcome to Your Creative and Magical Life, which is hopefully your actual life, but is also this podcast, which explores the intersections of tarot, creativity, magic, anti capitalism, social justice, and all sorts of metaphysical and mystical stuff, all with the goal of helping you cultivate a life that sparkles with magic and creativity. I'm your host, Cecily Saylor. I'm a tarot reader, a writer, a steward of creativity. I'm a double Capricorn who worships birds and dogs and all of nature. And I'm the creator of Typewriter Tarot, a project that helps people unleash their magic and creativity. Welcome to the podcast. I hope you enjoy it. I'm so glad you're here. Let's make some magic. This episode, we're exploring the Empress, and I am really excited to share this conversation with you that I had with Christina Rosales. Christina is someone I met through my boyfriend and his work doing video game writing, narrative, and development. I'm very ignorant about video games. I don't really play them, but my boyfriend was brought in to work on this game, this collaborative project to develop this game that really explored housing issues in Detroit specifically, but also all over the country, and how inequality and inequity and systemic oppression in the way that we relate to housing in America affects particularly Black, Brown, and Indigenous folks. And this game is called Dot's Home. And Christina is the person who imagined the whole concept for this game. And Christina is not a game developer. She is a activist. And she does a lot of work organizing and overseeing different campaigns and working with people on different campaigns across the country, not only around housing, but environmental justice, voting rights, all kinds of the important things that we really have to protect and fight for that are constantly being eroded. So that's how I got to know Christina. And I was just like, wow, this woman is amazing. She's an activist who said, let's make a video game. And she pulled together all of these people who worked in housing, who worked in game development. She got funding for the game. And it's been wildly successful, even though it's not like a high budget, multiplayer, sophisticated video game like the ones I imagine teenagers are buying for their Xbox. But I know this game, despite all of that, despite being sort of like an underdog game, has been winning awards and finding lots of users and players and really connecting with people who feel the same experience in their lives around housing injustice. And then I also found out Christina is a seamstress. She sews her own clothes and she models them on Instagram. And the way that I think about the Empress, in one sense, is having this like expansive and multiplied, multifaceted creative expression. And Christina has that. And when I reached out to her about doing this episode, she also mentioned that raising her son is a space where creativity really gets to be expressed and explored for her. And that also felt absolutely perfect for the Empress. The Empress is kind of a mother figure, a symbol of fertility, a creator, both of life, but also of creations that can be shared and enjoyed. So I really hope you enjoy this episode. It's a wonderful conversation and one of our favorite cards. Of course, everyone's always happy to see the Empress. So I hope this inspires you. Hello, Christina Rosales. Thank you so much for coming onto this podcast, Your Creative and Magical Life, where we are going to explore your specific creative and magical life and also the Empress. I'm so glad you're here.
Thank you for having me. This is like super exciting. Everybody has their like little like witchy phase, and you're catching me at a time where I'm just awakening it. So this is good.
Yay. I am so excited for you. You are going to make an amazing witch. I mean, you've been being a witch, really. That's what I see. But now that you're gonna claim it, own it, explore it, look out, world. Well, to start, will you share a little bit with us about your creative and magical life? Tell us about Christina and, yeah, the magic and creativity of you.
Uh, yeah. I so I have I've been a journalist and involved in like the housing movement and also just like naturally a creative person for a long time. Um, but I've never really owned the idea of I'm a creator, I'm a maker, I haven't owned that until very recently, which I'm sure we'll talk about. Um, but I'm born and raised in South Texas, like raised a Catholic, which if that's not witchy and magical, like I don't know what is.
Truly.
My mom is one of the most witchy and magical people ever, and she's very Catholic. So yeah, raised Catholic and I've believed in a long time in like mysticism and magic and the metaphysical for sure. And and I totally like connect with those Catholic roots and those like South Texas Mexican Catholic roots. But now I live in Seattle, Washington, which is very far from those roots spatially, but and I'm I tap into that all the time in just my life professionally. Like you wouldn't think that this stuff matters, but when I think about my work as a housing organizer specifically, I have to believe in the magic of like a multiplicity of small things that add up to this like magical tapestry. I like find myself weaving people together and following, leads and paths that take me on such a wild journey. So I like where I'm at in that part of my life. And I'm also a mom. My son is 3 years old and he has caused me to really like reach deep down into my like deepest part of my soul to I don't know, raise him with intentionality and to also see him as this magical miracle of life. And also, I think it takes a little bit of magic to parent a 3 year old. It's hard. You need all the help you can get.
Absolutely. I love all of that. And yeah, we're going to talk more about your work in the housing movement, but I love what you said about I didn't memorize it or it didn't all get captured in my brain, but that like additive factor of like multiplicity and synergy and things coming together. And a lot of your magic happens on a collective level, but you're really doing a lot to kind of, and I'm going to use the word stitch because you're also a seamstress, to sort of stitch together different power sources and different interests and passions and commitments. And yeah, that's such essential, powerful, important work, and absolutely the magic we need in this world right now. So I'm excited to explore that with you. And I brought you on the Empress episode because your magic seems to me to emanate and radiate in all of these different categories. And you don't, you've told me like your journey into tarot is very new, which is perfectly great. And I I don't expect my guests to know anything about the card. Sometimes they will, sometimes they won't. But to me, and I want to say how I know you. So my boyfriend Evan worked with you on a creative project that came out of your organizing work. It started, we're going to get into this in more detail later too, but it was a video game that has to do with housing issues. And then the video game became a stage play. And Evan and I traveled to Detroit to see the play performed on stage for the very first time. And that's where I got to kind of see you in action. And also where I learned that you sew. And I was like, is there anything this woman can't do? And so, like, your magic, your energy, your creativity, your passion really has a lot of different vessels, like you're multi-directional, it feels like. And even if you're new, I suppose, to claiming yourself as a creator, it seems like you've been allowing an abundance of creativity to flow in many different directions for some time. And that's kind of what the Empress represents for me. So I'm going to pull up, we're going to talk about the Empress a little bit as a card together, and then we'll dive back into your life. So I'm going to show you some versions of the Empress, and I can get closer to any one of these, but this one here, we're looking at the Empress from the Smith Rider-Waite tarot deck. And in this card, we see a female figure seated on a throne outside. She has a like Venusian shield at her feet that's heart-shaped, and there's wheat growing near her feet. There's a forest behind her. There are roses all over her white gown. There's a river traversing the background and coming, kind of falling down by her feet. She's holding kind of a short wand up in the air, and then she has a crown with 12 stars, one for every sign of the zodiac, we could say. So, yeah, I'll stop there. What else do you see? What do you notice, Christina?
I mean, all of the things that you pointed out. I want to notice also that she's like sitting on these cushions and she's like very regal, but also comfortable in that regal position. And I'm like, wow, that looks so powerful to me to rest in like in this power. So I want to point that out. And then there's this forest, but there's this like it's a forest of coniferous trees, but then there's this deciduous tree popping out that I'm like curious about.
Yeah, I love that level of detail. Yeah, that's interesting to explore. I had never thought about that. And I love what you say about resting in power. Like that's what we say about our activists who pass on to
Yeah.
the next realm, but it's also what they teach us when they're here, how to like be comfortable in the power that we possess and not buy into the narrative that all the power exists in the system, or that, as individuals we're powerless. So yeah, her counterpart is the emperor, who is much more rigid. And in the shadow side of the emperor is this connection to empire and authoritarianism and, yeah, rigidity. And the empress is, when you see the emperor, he's inside, there's no nature around him. But with the empress, there's this uh like the natural order is the order. So I like to think of her too, like one day she might be sitting out in the landscape painting what she sees, and the next day she may be deciding to have her friends together for a party, and the following day she may be like out in the community teaching something or sharing something. And so she isn't really like pinned down to one pursuit or one profession. Like, she knows that her energy can be impactful wherever she chooses to channel it, so long as it's something she cares about. And I think the way, nature works is like cyclical and seasonal. And the, yeah, that brings me back to the tree. It's like if people were in charge of forests, or if like the system was in charge of forests, they would put like this kind of tree all in one section. It would be like orchards, like these trees over here
Yeah,
and those over here and those over there. There would be like, I imagine this like segregation if like
sure.
white dudes were planting all the forests. But
Yeah,
nature will bring multiple things together, and like the deciduous tree and the coniferous tree belong in a system together, and difference like should be adjacent to each other. So yeah, there's something like really freeing and liberating about her.
yeah, yeah. I love all of that, and that totally resonates with me. Just the like the Empress is this person like comfortable in her power, and also like, and I can choose what I do with this power. As a mom and as like an organizer and as a like creative person, I don't have enough time in the world for all of it, but it's all so important to me. And it's like this, just seeing this image reminds me of like what is time? Like it doesn't, you might not have all the time in the world today, but the like seasonality of all of these ways to direct my energy, it feels so wonderful.
Yeah. I don't think she would do super well in like 9 to 5 cubicle situation. She would not
Mm-mm.
not thrive. um
Yeah.
and might start a revolution there. And I also want to connect her with motherhood. And she is connected to fertility. The wheat that we see at her feet is like a representation of bounty and new life. And she also functions as a kind of mother figure. We can connect with her if we are not actively being mothers, and we can connect with her deeply for those who are, mothering young children or grown children. And I think part of that like mothering quality in her is also this ability to receive, this receptivity. And we're going to get into that too. But, it isn't just mothering as like providing endless care and safety and comfort, but also, the mother needs nourishment, and the mother needs her own creative capacity, and she needs her power, and she needs support of her community and the natural world. And so we also learn things from the Empress about receiving, in addition to like nurturing and providing care. And you said something really beautiful about power, and it makes me want to ask you, like, how did you come to locate your power or claim it? And how do you see it or feel it? What does it mean to
Mm.
you?
It's a process. It's been a process. So I'm raised, South Texas, Mexican family, and the typical. It's such an interesting like paradox of sort of the way women come of age in like Mexican family patriarchy, where women are like the heads of household to a certain degree. They hold so much. They hold the culture of the family, and just like any mom, right? But there's also like, if you're a Mexican daughter, you're taught to be kind of submissive. The number of times I heard like, the your father's the head of the household. I have to do what he says. We have to follow his rules. Or the number of times I just saw how my dad and my brothers were treated quite differently than my mom and me, and just in our family culture, and just multiplied times like 200,000. That's sort of like the town I grew up in. So I think I grew up feeling like I don't have power. But something I've always been told is like, oh wow, you were very truthful and honest, and also you know really smart and capable, and all of these things. But I sort of channeled it in this way that was like straight A student, going to go to a great college, going to have my dream job, going to make money, have a family, buy a house, like typical, stereotypical. But it wasn't until I entered into movement work, I did journalism, and that sort of uh, made concrete sort of my role of following orders and doing the thing. But it wasn't until I ended up in movement work and noticed how powerful women were leading so many movements. And
Mm.
the people who resonated with me, who like really gave me some direction, were women who were creative and smart. And I like was like, I have to be like them, or I want to be like them, especially if I want to get some good stuff done. And that's sort of like my first like entrance into like claiming some power. But then I became a mom, and it's so funny how when you become a mom, like you're so powerful, you're providing nourishment and life to this little human, but you're also powerless in that you have very little decision making power. Like you have to succumb to the needs of this like crying human. And so it's again, it's like this paradox of motherhood, of like being powerful and also powerless,
Mm.
that I like have noticed. And you know but I sometimes I like deal with hard things at work or in relationships, and I like think to myself, like, I have nourished a human for a year with my own body. I have like taught this human how to sleep in their crib slash bed. I have potty trained this little human. If I can do that, I can do absolutely anything.
Truly.
And so that is really like such a source of pride for me, and it's just provided so many lessons and like enhanced the like power I feel in my ability to sort of do anything.
Yeah. Wow. Did you feel like, I think it's interesting, this trail from journalism, which does give the journalist, I think, a sense of agency or power, that like the stories you write and the people you interview and the way you weave together language and present information is a powerful way to change minds or inform people. So there's a kind of like power channel through journalism. And maybe for you, that wasn't sufficient. Your hands are tied a lot of times in journalism. You're supposed to be the objective observer
Yeah,
as you report on these situations that are, total crises, basically, and you
yeah,
can't really like say your truth fully. And I imagine that, you know, partly motivated your transition to activism, which is a job that not everyone can really tackle. Like you really do have to be centered in your power, and also not abusing your power, and also honoring the power of the people around you, and trying to figure out ways to harness that collective power and move it in accordance with the changes you want to see. And then moving into motherhood, where you maybe found the greatest power within you of all to like give life and protect and nourish. And then, yeah, that paradox you're talking about of powerlessness at the same time that you like come into the fullness of your power as a woman in certain ways. Just it seems like a really incredible journey, a really beautiful journey.
yeah. I mean, one of the greatest powers that I've learned over the past 3 years of parenting is serenity. Like just serenity with what is, and realizing like I can't control this situation, but I can control how I show up.
I think the Empress gives us some serenity vibes, and she looks very serene there in her natural setting. And you're reminding me of the serenity prayer, God grant me. Do you
The
know it?
courage to, yeah, the grant God grant me the courage to change the things that I can, this serenity to accept the things that I can't, and the wisdom to
Wisdom
know
to
the
know the
difference.
difference. Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's so true about power. Like, it's so abused in our world. And there's a kind of like voracious hunger for it among some people. And that power takes the form of money in a lot of cases, or resources, or yeah, just, but also power over people. And, you're practicing and learning and exemplifying this way of being with power, which has to do with like the responsibility of having it, what we get in all of the superhero stories. Like with great power comes great responsibility. Like, how
Yeah.
will you use it? Will you use it to try to control the things that you're not really supposed to control? Or will you find the grace and the serenity to sort of hold it where you need it, exercise it where it supports you and your people and your community? Or, will you let it run rampant and unleash it on innocent, good people who don't have anything to do with your power? Yeah, beautiful lesson. Let's talk a little bit about your work with Power Switch Action. Can you talk a little bit about the organization and maybe just at the moment, to the extent you can talk about it, the kinds of things you're working on in the housing movement? I know
Yeah,
there are
for
many things to
sure.
work on.
Yeah, for sure. Well, it is such a fitting thing to talk about the Empress and to talk about Power Switch Action because Power Switch Action is a little over 20 years old and started with mostly like labor, central labor councils across the country, mostly in California, but we've expanded since. They have founded these community labor partnerships, and those are our affiliates, which make up our whole network. And for a long time, we sort of engaged. If you know the labor movement, it's quite male dominated historically, and that's like our roots, right? That's where this organization has come from is engaging with labor and community to move forward, community benefits agreements and like ensuring development is equitable and that workers have rights and living wages, et cetera. But over the last few years, Power Switch Action, which back then was the Partnership for Working Families, Power Switch Action took on this like long-term agenda, and our whole board, which is made up of those affiliates, a lot of our board is women of color, and a lot of the staff, it's transitioned to be this like very like strong woman-led network. And when they came together right after the 2016 election for our, strategic planning and setting a long-term agenda, the sort of North Star, the guiding principle that the organization as a whole chose is a multiracial feminist democracy.
Mm.
So it's just so fitting that the Empress is there. I'm like looking and I'm like, wow, she is the Empress of a multiracial feminist democracy where all things are in harmony and we've created this regenerative, nourishing economy. Like that is the vision of our network. And so we do all sorts of economic justice and racial justice sorts of things. We have a lot of workers reimagining what work could be in the sort of app worker industry, like Uber
Mm.
and Lyft, and we have climate justice campaign, and then I work on housing and land justice, and the sort of long-term vision for housing and land justice is that people have control over where they live and the land. So it's not just housing; it's like the land that we're living on. And a lot of our campaigns, we're trying to be more intentional about integrating our campaigns. So I do housing campaigns. Some of my coworkers do reining in corporate power and climate justice. And sort of the way I put it all together, I got this from this book, The Ministry for the Future, which is a like sci-fi book.
Mm.
But the way I would describe kind of what we're trying to do is make our decisions, our collective decisions about policy and organizing about what is good for the biosphere. That's what's good for our economy. Yeah, so that's like our network and housing and land justice. at this point where I have this vision of, where we have a lot of folks concerned about tenant rights and tenant power. So, balancing that power and actually taking that power from landlords is sort of our goal on that front, and then using that power to rein in corporations, take control of our land and housing, and ultimately like govern our land and housing. So moving through that spectrum, like 20 years from now, what we want to see is, our affiliates and their people are in positions of power that's really meaningful, and that they are doing what's right for the biosphere.
I love that so incredibly much. I agree with it 1000 million%.
Yeah,
The Empress cosigns all of this. Like,
I'm
yeah,
sure.
she's resting in her power in the biosphere, like channeling biospheric concerns for like the vision of the people. Yeah, and I think, what an ambitious slate of issues to tackle, and also the recognition that they are all interrelated. Housing is connected with what we do to the land, and housing is connected to the amount of like freedom people have to use the land that they're on. Like if you live in an HOA, they want to try to tell you like what kind of plants you can and can't grow. And
Yeah,
they come in and like clear out the land and like level it out and plant some non-native trees that are all like baby trees, and the mature trees are gone. And it's like, what about the animals that lived here, the bugs, the pollinators? And then our relationship with all of that stuff is crucial to our well-being as humans. Like we're happier, we're more
yeah,
nourished, we are more mentally and psychologically healthy and spiritually healthy when we're in relationship with the world at large. So what incredible work. And especially as I think systems kind of feel in certain ways even more entrenched in those big grooves of power hoarding and extractive uh maneuvers. It's like such a hard it looks like such a hard battle. And I would love to hear if you would share maybe a recent thing that y'all are celebrating in your work, or some of the great successes you've encountered in the last few months or year. What does it
yeah,
look like when your power and your action are victorious?
yeah. I mean, at this point, there's like campaign wins, which are nice and splashy. Like we've had, affiliates win rent, substantial rent control and right to an attorney if you're evicted. Like those things are really powerful. And
Mhm.
um, people worked really hard in our affiliates, our affiliate organizers and staff. Like they worked really hard to get those things. But that's like, to us, like that's sort of okay, now what? um, how do we take that, the things that we want, and turn them into bigger wins? And it's not for the sake of winning, but for the sake of, you know, ensuring that folks have more power and can govern themselves and control their lives. So we also had this in Chicago. We've I've been supporting this campaign around a Green New Deal, which is very much about like with doing what's right for the biosphere. And they've launched this campaign toward social housing, so ensuring that folks can live in housing that's like decent, affordable, dignified, and also social, like connected. That folks have, and that it's green and beautiful, like that it's dignified, like people feel good about living there. And they're connecting it also to like green healthy schools, so like decarbonizing our our public schools in Chicago. And I'm like really proud of that campaign, because I've been there, I've been supporting it for a long time, but I've also just seen how this particular coalition has come to this, without me inserting my witchy language or science fiction language of like doing what's good for the biosphere. Like these folks have landed there and have been influenced by their own magic. Those organizers in Chicago who are really who have a vision for like the kind of city that they want to live in and that they want to be. So I'm really excited about that. And this is an ongoing thing, an ongoing campaign that they've launched and they're organizing toward it.
That's amazing. I like too that you use that word interconnected and how, the housing and the schools, like in a campaign like this, when you're able to successfully tie these things together and, present them to the community as connected matters, which I'm sure everyday people, it's not like like mind blowing, they see it in their lives all the time. But it's sort of like in our lives, it's like you go to the school board to talk about the schools, and you go to, city council to talk about the housing. And, of course, sometimes all these issues come up in the same place, but to wrap these together as like community concerns that are interconnected. And, if we can do this in the schools and in these living spaces, what's possible, like how the magic gets multiplied there. And I think what we see in the Empress too is interconnectedness. And her magic is going to, like, she will go to the school board meeting and say what she has to say, and she will go to city council. But she also sees, like, these are conversations we should be having everywhere. And, the kind of like feminist biospheric approach to life is one centered in interconnectedness. And what a beautiful achievement to kind of bring that out in a campaign that folds both of those together. That's super exciting. And when, one affiliate can do this, this becomes a model people can look to in other
Yeah.
places.
Yeah, totally. Experiments to just, I hate using the phrase like scale because that's such an emperor kind of
Yeah.
language that I don't want to engage in this work. But what we can learn from this campaign and how others can adopt it, like and adopt it in a way that works for them. Like it doesn't have to be social housing. Maybe it could just be this great massive revenue source, taxing the rich, taxing all the emperors so
Yeah.
that the empress can rule alongside all of these great people who are working for biospheric harmony.
Beautifully, beautifully said. So let's go a little bit to the creativity part of your activism work, which is where I encountered you, as I said. And um, do you want to talk about Dot's Home? Do you want to explain it? Would you like me to explain it?
Um, I can talk about it forever. So
Okay. I know
let's
you've been
let's
asked about it a lot. So,
um, so I can talk about Dots Home, the video game. I was part of this collective called the Ride Home Stories Project, and that's where I met Evan and various other people to create this video game. I mean, the Ride Home Stories Project was organizers and artists coming together to make things that weren't just like we have a political message for you because that's not resonant. It was like how do we engage art and culture, um, not to deliver the message but to reflect it and also to make meaning of our everyday movement work. We're so engaged in like the day-to-day campaigns and you organize this many people and you pass this policy, but like what does it all mean? And I think very few things can do that the way art and culture can. So we made Dots Home. There were various other projects. There was a children's book, a podcast, an animated web series that had a pilot. So not a full series, I think, but just a pilot and some ongoing writing toward more episodes. But we made a video game. That was sort of my group of, of organizers and artists. And Dots Home tells the story of a Black woman in Detroit in her 20s And the story revolves around her and her experience of living in her grandmother's beloved home and learning what having that home and keeping that home has meant to this family over the generations, and where it's landed them. And we say the sort of log line is, race, home, and opportunity collide. There's a lot of hard decisions that Dot's family had to make over the generations. And so Dot, speaking of magic, gets a magic key, goes back in time, and the player is sort of playing as Dot and makes key decisions, like goes back in time and makes key decisions about her family's life. And the decisions sort of impact the ending. And so you get to see sort of our team's interpretation of like what the past has meant to the present. This video came out in fall of 2021, and since then has been played by, I think it's the downloads is like 500,000 downloads, but it's gotten a ton of attention from various people who, like, the housing movement does not engage with, like folks who care a lot about video games, and folks who care a lot about sort of like accurate and like meaningful Black representation in media, in addition to some housing people have cared about it. But the goal was to be in a different sphere, and I think we did that. Yeah.
Yeah. And what was it like? Was this kind of like the first, I mean, probably not, but maybe of its size, was this the first sort of creative project you brought into your work? And I feel like we had a conversation of like, you go to your boss and you're like, we're going to make a video game. And it's like, what? uh, how, how was that like bringing, this creative project into organizing work when it was, unclear what it would be so effective and so impactful and so well received and celebrated?
Totally. Yeah. I mean, back then this was like a wish and a prayer. Like looking back on it, right now it feels so like, of course this came to be. We worked so hard, and that's really not that's not an accurate portrayal of sort of the journey, because we didn't know what this was going to be. The sort of idea was like, what if we talked about housing in a video game? And it was sort of the mechanics of it. It made sense. Like, the housing system is so rigged over a series of decisions at this macro level as well as this micro level. A video game is kind of made in that way. Like, it's made, you get a choice set and you navigate it through the video game and hope for a good ending. That's the housing system. So that was sort of like what we had as an idea. And then we brought on really amazing artists, including Evan Narcissus, who gave a lot of feedback on just like, this has to be a story about family. This has to be something that people can relate to. So, but bringing it back to like the organizing and sort of the making this part of my job, which is hard to do, we were really lucky that we were funded by a big foundation for all of this. This was just sort of a theory. It's like, if you bring arts and culture and housing, you have the power to change the narrative. And this foundation took a huge leap and said, like, we'll fund this. So we had a lot of freedom. And the person who put all of this together, Luisa Dantas, is a filmmaker who sort of like believed in it and was very adamant that this project be made. And so when I was able to, like, at the time I was working in Texas for an organization called Texas Housers. When I brought it to my boss, they were like, this is very strange and we do not understand it, but we trust in you. And also, this is costing us no money. So go forth. And just like continuing to, I think that's sort of was the easy part. I think what is hard to continue to do in this sort of like integrating Dot's home in particular, and art and culture broadly. What's hard is that it doesn't immediately make sense to many people, especially people in movement work. You kind of have to make the case for it, and you have to sort of, I cannot quantify like what it means that Dot's Home has been played by 500,000 people. Like, what does it mean for Power Switch Action? What does it mean for our movement? Like, I don't know, but it feels important. Um, what does it mean that we made it into this, live stage play in front of, a couple hundred people, 250 people, and they saw it and they really connected it and they laughed and they cried and I don't know, like I don't know how to quantify it. I don't know how to put it in a grant report, but it's compelling and it's just it feels like magic. And to not tap it, I think it's a huge risk that like we would be taking. I think the risk is not using it. And so that's kind of how I've made the case in my work. And I think people understand that I'm so passionate about Dot's Home, but just about this endeavor to integrate art and culture. People are like, we believe you, go do it. But I mean, the other thing I would say is like, I have this how hard can it be sort of bone in my body.
Mm,
Um, it
that's
leads
helpful.
me, it leads me probably towards some decisions that maybe I shouldn't have been made, maybe, but what kind of word is should?
Exactly.
But I think when we were making the game, it was sort of like we have to recruit, writers and also people who will actually make it, using this game engine. We have to navigate how to publish it, all that stuff. It's kind of like, how hard can it be? People do it all the time. I had never made a game. And so then we like took it into making it a play. And it was like, we have this vision of making it a play and my one of my key collaborators here, Julia Allen, walked with me on this journey and sort of she was a guide, but she and I were like, how hard can it be like to do this? And
Once
it
you've made a
really
video
worked
game,
out.
it's like,
Yeah, I feel like I mean I'm not the sole creator by any means or even lead creator of Dot's Home, the video game, but it definitely feels like a child that a collective of us have created and raised.
mhm.
So it's sort of this like, we've mothered a game, I've mothered a child. It has only strengthened this bone of like, how hard can it be?
Yeah, it was an incredible like consortium of people coming together to make it. And video games are, it looks to me one of the more difficult art forms just because it's all virtual. Like you have to,
Yeah,
and technology is sort of like, to me, I'm very earthy and I'm like, give me something I can touch. But yeah, like writers, animators, coders, and then the publishing part. And, I've seen the website and the list of people, and many of them from the housing organizing space. And then, all these other kinds of folks working in different arenas. And just to collectively bring together a group of that size and get everyone together in this creative process could be like a big hot mess for some people and became this like beautiful creation that's having yeah, reaching 500, 500,000 people, 500,000 people across the US, and some of them I imagine young people who are like kind of coming into the world and seeing what the constructed world, the realities of that, and how that kind of
yeah,
squares with what they see in the culture and what they see in their own families and their experiences. And to not just then make the video game and then to say, you know what, we do need real people performing this. Like, let's see what other life form this can take, which feels very Empress as well. Like, it can live this way, it can live this way. And I think you did a lot of work, or maybe all the work, adapting the video game to a script. Am I remembering that right? With Julia, maybe?
yeah. No, I mean, I took the video game script and took a first pass at adapting it. My like main contribution, I would say, is creating the character of 4D.
Yes, talk about 4D.
Yeah. So the video game is you're the player, you have the controls. The play, it's still the same characters and stuff, but the audience needs sort of a mechanism to make the decisions and also understand the context. Like sometimes, you can linger in a video game and sort of read things and explore, but with a play, you got to keep it moving on the stage. So when I was going through the script and trying to adapt it, I brainstormed with Julia and said, like we need to have a character or a person who's sort of the host. It's sort of part game show. We're turning a video game and making it into sort of like a game show. So they're part host, part commentator and narrator, but we also wanted them to be funny. So I kind of looked up. I know a few things about theater of the oppressed, and there's this type of character in it called the Joker. And so I sort of took a little bit of a like tonal lesson from that and applied it to my first cut of the adaptation. And then we handed it off to more expert writers. Or really, I mean, I hate to say expert writers because we're all experts, but the directors, Tony Cunningham and Shireen Azab, and then a friend of the game or like major contributor to the creation of Dot's Home, Paige Wood. The four of us, got into sort of a little writer's room and polished off the rest. And they really took ownership after I made the first pass. Like I sort of was a consultant because really I like know the story and the intentions and the game pretty well. So yeah, that's how that ended up.
Yeah. And so I just want to kind of describe the scene a little bit for people. I had never been to Detroit and was really curious about it. Because I remember, I guess, like in the early 2000s when the city's gone through a number of different challenges and struggles, or maybe it was like the 2000, that 08, 09 kind of
Sure.
economic crisis when, if you didn't live in Detroit, there was like, come live in Detroit, like writers, come live
Yeah.
here, get a house for, next to nothing. So yeah, we went to Detroit and I could see there are these beautiful old houses throughout the city that were, windows blown out or holes in the roof, and
Yeah.
places that could be really beautiful to live if they could be cared for or if people had the money they needed to care for them. And we went to the community theater where the play was being put on. And yeah, like you said, 250 residents in the area or people. It was also, what was the organization? Detroit Mobilize,
Detroit Action.
Detroit Action.
Detroit Action. Yeah.
Yeah. And probably many of their organizers getting to see the play as well, and incredible acting. And the character, the actor who played 4D, had this kind of like cosmic looking outfit. It looked like he came from like the outer planets and sort of zoomed in to help guide us through the story. And he would kind of roll out on this, I think was a podium sort of thing to like hold forth, and would show what Dot's options were. And, we would watch these scenes unfold with Dot and her grandmother, or, back in time, she's like seeing her mother and father interacting, like trying to buy their first house or hold on to their house. And you reach these choice points, and 4D turns to the audience. It's like, what should Dot do? And the audience just gets to like shout out and vote. And then that moves the story forward. And so it was written as a, like, in the spirit of the video game, a choose your own adventure type of thing, where it wasn't just you sat in the audience and watched the story and had your own thoughts about it, but also got to participate in the creation of the story and where it went based on what you were seeing, but of course based on people's lived experience with housing. And a lot of the people there who were connected to the housing movement and Detroit Action, there was a space, a kind of town hall that happened after the performance, which was wonderful. And that was a space where people shared stories that just were heartbreaking about what they had experienced with their own homes, or, ridiculous fees they had been asked to pay like the inability to get funds after a storm, created damage to the home, things like that. And just like, so it became not only this constructed art form, but also like the real context. There was a city council member there who was asked questions and who responded. And um, yeah, so much interconnectedness in that experience. I've never seen anything like it. It was unforgettable and incredible. I celebrate
Wow.
like what a life span just in a couple years for Dot's Home to go from video game to this kind of other groundbreaking sort of theater.
Yeah, thank you so much. That's so lovely and like so kind. And I'm like honored that you consider it such a huge like moving piece, even in like your own witnessing. And I have to say that the these kinds of things take the right partners. Like Dot's Home, the video game, would not have been made without the right people leading it and moving it. And this whole endeavor, it was like so many people. Like if any one of us was not around, it wouldn't have been what it was. Julia and Detroit Action staff, and then I mean the host. It's funny. The theater company is called A Host of People, and that's the ensemble that put it together. And I mean, I credit them as sort of the adapters of the game. Their production design was amazing and so powerful for everybody there. I have to say that like art art is so many things, and people should not feel as though they have to be perfect to be artists, or that their art has to be perfect. But there's something to be said about high quality art in this sort of community space, in front of community that doesn't really get to engage in going to a Broadway or a ballet or an opera. Um, this art spoke to them, and there's something to be said about the quality, like the way Shireen at A Host of People says is like our contribution is bringing the highest quality, most meaningful art we can to people. Like that is our contribution to the movement. And they did that. It's not like, you know, no shade on local community theater, but it's not local community theater. It's like so professional. And because of that, it was just so effective and meaningful.
Yeah, I'm really glad you said that because I think um, with many of the artists or creative spirits, I call them, that I support or who come, into Typewriter Tarot to reconnect with their creativity, there is this internalized hierarchy of what's good or what's significant. And it's like if it's um if it's not published by this kind of publishing house or like mainstream publishing versus self-publishing. And I definitely used to buy into that paradigm and sort of look down on self-publishing. And same with theater, like if it's not at like the big theater in town and it's just the local community theater, there's some sort of stigma kind of implicit in that phrase at this point because of the sort of systemic separation around it. But all that does is separate tons of people who don't have the money or the freedom or the time to go and who don't necessarily like connect or resonate with that art. Like sometimes like art is for the elite and like that's who it's being made for and it leaves out the everybody. And what a empowering and refreshing thing for art to come to your community and to do it for you, not just to go to like the rich the rich emperors and show them this play and hope that they'll
Yeah,
like open their wallets, but to go take it to the
yeah,
people who have lived it and can feel a kind of like cathartic experience or a sense of like being witnessed or seen through the art that was made around the experience that they viscerally lived through. So I'm just
yeah,
glad you
for
said
sure.
that because it's a great reminder that like if you have a story to share, if you have art to make, do it to the best, make it the best quality you can and share it with the people who need to see it. And don't let well, it's not going to be published by this publisher, or it's not going to be at this kind of theater, or appear in this kind of gallery, prevent you from making anything. Like, that's a tragedy in which the system wins. So
Yeah,
glad you mentioned
100% for sure.
I wanted to ask you, how do you have a sense at all of how participating in the creative process around Dots Home, the video game and the production, changed you? Did it
Mm.
change the way you think about organizing or art or
Yeah.
anything?
I mean, I think it made me there was some like any production or anything that you do, there's challenges. There were challenges in making the video game. There were sort of delays and problems, and same with the play, not necessarily with the production, but sort of the whole turning out the whole project. There were problems, or just like tensions, I think is more accurate. And throughout all of it, I'm reminded, Louisa, who is sort of the godmother of the whole Rise Home Stories suite of projects and who has become such a big mentor of mine. Throughout all of it, Louisa was there saying, like, you know how to do this. Like, you can manage this. You know how to do this. And it was very much this, like, no, I'm not a creator. I'm not an expert at anything related to this. I'm a housing person. And oh, publishing the game and having it be so resonant for so many people, and then doing the play and having it turn out really well. I think I've identified myself as a creative person, and like kind of a visionary person. Like, I sometimes it's just all you can do is follow this vision you set. And I sort of can claim that now, I think. But it also made me think of, we can't do anything alone. I think a lot of movement work, you have these charismatic leaders, charismatic people at the helm, and the movement is them. They are the magic. They are the magic. There isn't magic in the movement. And I'm like, no, that's I can't buy into that anymore. I don't buy into that anymore. As many people as we can get interconnected and claiming their voice and power in a project, like, the better this will end up being better, which is a very feminist leadership stance, and very much like Empress, trademark.
Yes. I'm so excited that you are claiming the identity of creator at last. And it's so funny that, like, it's like this subconscious part of you, or maybe it's not subconscious, but like, there's that how hard can it be bone in your body that will take you into doing the thing that we associate with the identity of creator or whatever. So it's like, it's funny how even in the process of creating, it's not, it sounds like, I don't know if I'm reading it correctly, but like, once you see it out there, then you were able to kind of own it more. Is there any part of you that, like, wished you could own it sooner? I think we take the time we take, and that's just fine.
Yeah, I mean, it's like the stages of writing. Like, I remember being a reporter and coming back with a full notebook and having to turn out something before deadline, and then going in this cycle of, like, all right, writing my lead, writing my nut graph, writing all these things, quote, quote, quote. It was very formulaic. And then you're like, this is horrible. This is awful writing. And, then you sort of move forward, and all right, well, it's not that bad. And okay, like, I guess this is fine. And then you're like, I don't know, I made the best of it. That's that. Like, it's just this process of moving through this pain cave that you create for yourself, and and then emerging when you're close to being done, or when it's out there and you're like, oh, okay, like I can claim that. I think it's very, there are moments where you something feels good in my body, and I'm like, yeah, this is really powerful. This is something worth putting out there and sharing. But it's like, I don't know, those moments are so fleeting. um, but sometimes, I mean, throughout all of Dot's Home, it always felt really magical to me. Like something in my body was like, this is, from the very beginning, from when we pitched it to our full like cohort and foundation and stuff, to now, it still feels pretty magical in my body. Like this is meaningful and it matters, and we need to use this as a tool for our movement.
Yeah. So some part of you was like always in the belief. I also suspect, or one way I think about it is kind of like projects also choose us. And when you're like, when you've been chosen, that like, yeah, just you will be pulled and there kind of isn't a choice on in a sense. And then another thing you said makes me think like there's just always going to be a tension between the vision and what you can produce with like your limited brain or like the limits of technology or the limits of money or whatever. And there's that frustration of like, in my mind, it is like this. And like in reality, it feels like that. And you struggle, and then you see it finally complete. And it takes on that life of its own that it came into the world to have. And then you can like step back and say, like, yeah, that's pretty great.
Yeah.
And I helped make that. Um, let's move into your sewing talents. And so Christina hasn't, I learned this when I met you. You mentioned this, and then I started following you on Instagram. And uh, you post yourself wearing these things that you make. I've seen you make a whole blazer. I've seen you posted, I believe, underwear and maybe a bra, a button-down
Mm-hmm.
shirt, just like not the easiest. I can't sew worth a shit. So I'm just like, I can't imagine the skill in 2023 when like everything is made for us. It's 2024 now, isn't it? But like it's incredible. You make wonderful clothing for yourself, which I think is also, I suspect, knowing about your work, like a kind of position toward like being against wastefulness, being against fast
Yeah.
fashion, being
Yeah.
being more resourceful with how we like get the stuff that we need versus like going to big corporations that underpay their workers and exploit other countries. And I should just
Yeah.
let you maybe rant about it, but tell us how you came to sewing, and yeah, take us on that journey to like then you're sharing
Yeah.
about it on Instagram.
Yeah. I learned to sew when I was a little kid. My mom doesn't sew, and she avoids it and doesn't want to do it. But my grandmother, my paternal grandmother, who I'm very close to, and have been since I was a little kid. She was a single mom of four kids, an empress herself, I believe.
Yeah.
And she taught me to sew like little bags and stuff. She taught me to use a sewing machine. I was little. And when I was a kid, I dressed up as Sailor Jupiter of like Sailor Moon fame, and she made my costume. And it was like the most inspiring thing ever to me, as a kid. And fast forward, I like sewed a few things, like sewed a few sentimental like keepsake quilts for myself and my mom or whatever. But I didn't really pick it up until the summer of 2018. Something in me, I think a friend of mine asked me to make them. I used to make these little cross stitch portraits. So I would cross stitch like portraits of people. And so sometimes I made them for my parents. But this one friend of mine asked me to make one for her sister who was having a baby. And to like, you know, do one of her sister holding a baby and her husband and a dog. I was like, oh yeah, I can do that. And but it hit me like a ton of bricks. Like, oh, like making something with your own two hands is so valuable and so sentimental and so important in the world. I've never really sewn it myself a garment, but like I kind of want to. And so I have this like, how hard can it be phone? And went out and like got fabric and got a pattern. The first fabric I ever bought for garment making was a cut of fabric from Seattle, which, at the time I lived in Texas and I got in Seattle. Now I live in Seattle. So kind of full circle there. But, and I made a tank top and had a lot of problems making this tank top. And I still have it and I still wear it, and love it dearly. But I called my grandmother to tell her and I sent her a picture and she was like, what did you learn? Like, how did you do? And it's like, well, like I made these like bust, shaping darts at the bust, and that was really hard. And I like had to bind the sleeves because it's like sleeveless. And she's like, yeah, that's not the easiest thing to make. Like, why did you make that in the first place? But it was so like liberating to have made something for myself and to sit down at a sewing machine and just like create something. I was like, wow, that is, and it was like a spell. It was just like it washed over me, and I was like, I can do this times a million. And then I made more things. I made a lot of really bad things that I'm like, I cannot wear this, I cannot use this, and that's sort of my vibe when it comes to creating. Like making stuff that's bad is a good thing. So yeah, so I made a bunch of things and started to just like share them on Instagram. I discovered like sewing on Instagram is like a thing. So it's nice to like connect with people and like learn a ton of lessons from folks, and also just feel this like solidarity of people with people who are doing the same thing I am. Sewing people are the nicest people and so encouraging. And then I've like made progressively larger things. Like a big landmark sort of make was making my own jeans,
Oh my
which
gosh.
I did a year after I started sewing. That was
Wow.
like a hallmark thing. Making an underwire bra, which is
Oh
like
my God.
that was also a thing. Making a lined jacket, a blazer, all of those things are complicated to make and so confidence boosting. Yeah, and I like have learned a lot about my body and myself. Like I started sewing before I had a kid, and then continued sewing after I had a kid, and bodies change, and sewing made me so comfortable with that. I didn't struggle with it. I mean, in some ways it was like, wow, I made all of these things and now they don't fit. That sucks. Oh well, I'll make some more things. It was pretty liberating because then you learn like what are clothes except for like they're it's a compilation of like average measurements when you go and buy clothes ready to wear. But when you make them, you're like, oh, I can see spatially on this pattern, like it has this curve here, and that's not going to work for me. I'm a little straighter here, so I'm going to adjust this. Or like, my waist is higher up than this. I need to adjust this. It's just becomes a matter of like facts and shapes, and you just sort of deal, and that's like liberating.
That's really cool. Yeah, like it does seem to create, I see how it would create a more intimacy with your body
Yeah,
and a kind of objectivity at the same time. And you're also like to sew for yourself seems like an act of love. Like you need to pick out the thing, you need to find the fabrics that suit you, and then you're going to spend a decent amount of time like working it out and sewing it together, and then you've gifted yourself this thing that you exactly wanted. And yeah, your body being the guide in the process. That's really my mind's like expanding open, taking that in. That's really beautiful.
yeah,
Where can people find, can we all follow you on Instagram as you do this journey?
yeah. My handle is at Tinita Sewing and Such or something like that. What is it? Yeah, Tinita underscore sewing and the letter N such.
And we'll put it in the show notes too. Yes.
Yeah, and I post things there mostly as a journal for keeping in mind what I've made. But also, so the sewing community is like in solidarity. People post what they make. They do a hashtag on the pattern so that if somebody else wants to make that same pattern, they can see some of your notes of like adjustments or like fabrics or whatever. See the way clothes fit on different bodies.
And there again, a kind of interconnectedness, like let's be resourceful together.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love it. It's so impressive. I'm just like, I can't believe you I can't believe you made it. I mean, not obviously I can you're you're the Empress. Like, of course you can make it. It's also such an like a nourishing, we associate it so much with like domesticity and women's work. And for many of us, like our ancestors, just, 3 generations back, like that's the only way many of them had clothing. And coming by your clothing was like several days trip or, saving a lot of money. And then sometimes like incredibly time consuming, depending on the size of the family that you had. And we, like so many of us have just drifted away from, obviously there is a robust community of folks who are sewing, but many of us just have like it's a forgotten art to the mainstream, I suppose. And I think it's just wonderful to see you um reminding all of us what's possible.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, sewing feels like a political statement nowadays. It's like claiming the power of feminine, women's work,
Yeah.
and claiming the power of like time, like
Mm.
we're so taught that like time is something that you make the most of and like do the things to save all the time. But like F that, like I'm gonna spend all my time like making this just right and doing all of these things um that will make me feel good. Um, and then on top of that, it's art. You art you wear in your body. It's this like sentimental thing. Like I get to wear my time. I get to wear what I care about all the time, and um, it's just like a sign of just shirking all expectations that I give into consumerism. I mean, yeah, I have to source the fabrics and whatever, but usually you can make like conscious decisions about like I'm not going to get polyester because that's made with plastic. I'm going to get merino wool with made with sheep that didn't have to go through this very painful excruciating process. I'm going to get it ethically sourced. Hemp is like really sustainable. I'm going to make these decisions that are overall good for the biosphere compared to the alternative.
Yeah, and I think I love that you mention time. I love everything you just said, but the like the emperor energy as it's been mishandled in capitalism and white supremacy and patriarchy is like demanding this efficiency of time so that more labor can be done for the people who make the most money off the labor. And it kind of infuses in our lives this sort of forgetting that like and because now there's like tons of self-help books about making yourself efficient and like maximizing your time and not getting distracted, which is all just I mean, it's part of like there's so much in our lives to do. So like you want to like stay on top of it, but it's also totally bought into that same construct. And it's like we deserve to have time to ourselves. Like we didn't incarnate to just labor for someone else. Like that's bullshit. And like we deserve to have time to make things that we care about and make things for ourselves and make things for the people that we love and our family and to do it artfully if we want to. So yeah, like what a revolutionary in in this moment act to be like I am going to take the time and I'm going to make it how I want it. And how does it feel to like wear it out and, when someone compliments you?
I mean, it's always like, oh, thanks, I made it. And people look at me like I'm a magical human. And
Yes. And then you dazzle.
yeah,
What about you?
yeah, it's so confidence boosting. But I also like sometimes I'm like, I hope that you also like take away from this moment that you can do things too. Like you can do something like this too.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Leadership, Empress style. When we were talking, when I invited you on the episode, you also mentioned something I hadn't considered originally, because I haven't met your son or seen you with your son just yet. But you mentioned that motherhood is a space of creativity for you. And I'd love for you to talk about that.
Every day it feels like I have to come up with some other magical way for my son to do things like put on his shoes, get in the car. It's just like everyday stuff. I have to come up with some sort of story, some sort of thing. And that's just creativity. And I mean, the truth is like I was not parented quite in that way. A lot of us were not. And it feels like such a privilege to be able to like spend the mental and emotional energy to like have this respectful relationship with my son and for him to sort of you know grow up and believe that he is powerful and worthy. And I have to come up with all sorts of ways to like entertain him and engage in dramatic play. And sometimes it's mind numbing. It's so hard to like do that with a 3-year-old. As smart and creative as he is, he's still 3 and still figuring out like basic plot and logic and stuff like that. But it's to me, it's like at the end of it, not at the end because I'm going to be his mother forever, but someday I want him to be able to be creative and magical and be right with the world. And so I sort of have to create that container for him every day. And like I also have to find ways to explain really hard stuff that happens in life. His best friend in preschool, her mom died.
Mm.
And it was just it was so hard and to understand like she died of breast cancer. And but in our household that was like pretty hard to talk about, and so much harder in her household, right? But for my son to be able to like understand how that worked and to cope with what like the fear of how you can lose someone. My dog of 12 years also died in the same, the day after.
Oh
um,
my.
yeah, and so we had to talk about loss and grief and do it in a way that a 3-year-old can cope and understand. And it's what I've noticed is that it's just these things. As a parent, you like create this container for your kid to experience the like life, and hopefully that container expands and expands, and then they take control of it and sort of control their life. Yeah.
What a beautiful articulation of parenting and motherhood, this container setting that can be a responsibility you embrace creatively. And yeah, I think a lot of people grew up, with parents who were at a loss for what to do or just were stressed or for lack of models in their own lives just sort of dominate. And it's like, you need to get in the fucking car now. And like,
Yeah.
that's how you get a kid in the car. And versus like considering what will motivate this child in this moment to climb in
Yeah.
that car so we can go and do what we need to do. And it really requires like digging deep in yourself and finding energy that you weren't you're trying to drive and go do stuff, and you have to go into this other place of yourself and conjure up something. And I guess I want to take that beautiful metaphor maybe even a little deeper, and if you imagine the container that you're creating like as a physical kind of object, or one that we could see or sense or conceptualize, I guess, like, what do you think it is like or looks like, or what is it to you?
Yeah. I mean, the first like image that comes to mind is like it's almost like setting the floor, like the floor that, my kid walks on, or like setting this sort of path. And, that path can be gravel and rough rocks, or like mud, or difficult to tread sand or something like that. And the goal is that it's sort of a mix of things so that he can kind of manage different things in the future. So it's like I want his feet to touch this like carpety moss or to like maybe walk some sand and gravel so that he like knows what that's like, and also knows he can do it. And some like flowers and tree roots that he has to pay attention to and not like trip over, be attentive and intentional with those steps and or whatever. Like I I I have to set that path for him and let him eventually just like walk it, right? It reminds me of this poem that I know it because I sang it in a choir a while back, but it's like on children, like your children are not your children. They are the sons and the daughters of life's longing for itself.
Mm,
So I like think about him as like just being this part of this biosphere, and just like longing for it to nourish him and for him to nourish it, you know?
yeah, it's like I've heard that verse before. It's incredibly beautiful, and I'm glad you bring it up. And it reminds me of the word stewardship, and
Ah,
that parents are kind of like stewards for their children to help them understand what this world is and show them as many possibilities as one can muster for navigating that world. And I love that image of the path because it's so apt, of course, for life. Like that's a comparison we often make, but the different textures you give it, it's like our feet gather so much information when they touch the earth, and our feet can really adapt to like what they feel. If we weren't in shoes all the time, like they would be very
yeah,
like flexible and responsive, and you kind of leading him to these different places, and sometimes life just like dropping all of you on this certain kind of path where you have to conjure the stewardship of like, how do I help this make a little more sense to him, or how do I create the container in this moment for the way he feels about this or the questions that he has. But yeah, just kind of like teaching him how to read his environment and how to read himself in relationship to that environment.
yeah,
And I think that's very Empress too. Like she's in tune with what's around her and very in tune with herself. And from that attunement, like incredible things can be created or discovered or amazing.
yeah.
Very Empress of you. in, uh, I love it. I just love it. Also, the Empress, you mentioned, you noticed how she is kind of lounging, and she has a big comfy pillow, and she has one of those long circular pillows. Looks like she has a kind of velvety red blanket. So if she wanted to lay back and just take a nap, she could do that. And so, the Empress, in order to do all of these many things she does, and all the creation and the interconnectedness and the attuning, she must rest. And so must an activist, and so must a mother and a creator. And so, uh, when you take the time to sow, when you take the time to show up for the organizing efforts that you're a part of, for the creative endeavors you're a part of for your son and your family, how do you take care of yourself? How well do you receive support and ask for it? What is your wisdom here?
Yeah. I mean, not particularly well. I'm really lucky to have well, I'm not lucky. I chose a really great partner who is really supportive of me. And admittedly, like I'm the head of the household in the sense that I care for us. I care for our child. I set the tone for how we raise our child. I've done that work, and so he sort of just follows along and contributes to that effort. But he understands the things that are really important to me, to rest and recover and sort of engage the way I need to. So I don't do well with, like, I got to sleep in my kid's bed most nights. Like I don't do well with the sort of lounging around. It's really hard for me to sit still, to be honest. But one of the things that brings me so much peace, I've sung in choirs since I was in second grade. Again, this I love singing. I don't really like singing alone. I'm not a soloist sort of person. I have a nice voice and I like to sing in choirs. And it's because I love the, multi-part harmonies and, you know, breathing in tune with your neighbor and creating this music together. I love the feeling of picking up a work that has, an opus that has been sung millions of times by people all over the world and contributing to that sort of work, and then just collectively creating work. And I also like that I don't have to lead it. Like I don't identify as a musician as much as just like someone who likes to sing in choirs and has done it for a long time. I'm not in control of that work when I'm singing in a choir. I'm just contributing, and that is like really restorative for me. The other thing I do, that is really important to me, that my coworkers and my partner really know, like I prioritize this, is dancing. I'm part of this like community fitness like dance group, and we get together a couple of times a week, and there's somebody I show up and I move my body. I think everybody can benefit from shaking their booty from time to time.
Amen.
And so I you can find me on Thursdays and most Saturdays dancing to Beyonce and K-pop and Dua Lipa and Pitbull with this group, and it's endorphins galore, and I find so much like joy and a certain kind of rest, different kind of rest for my brain,
Mm-hmm.
but like such nourishment for my body. Yeah.
You keep getting more and more Empress as we talk. Like that's two additional art forms that you participate in. Yeah, I love that. And it's kind of interesting. It's just like you don't necessarily get too comfortable doing nothing, but you get some nourishment and restoration from like you have to be a leader in a lot of ways, and you choose to be a leader in a lot of ways, and you get relief and restoration by following a little bit or letting someone else lead, and you get to just enjoy the structure, the container that others have created, and you don't have to set it yourself. What is
Absolutely.
Yeah, what is your sun sign? I feel like I know, but I don't want to project it onto you.
I'm a Cancer.
Oh, you're a Cancer. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. I was gonna guess a Capricorn, the way that you just like want to be, that you kind of like working or like doing, I guess. But can't I
I
think
love,
you
yeah,
you like loving, and you
yeah.
do in service of your love. Yes, beautiful. I was gonna, as a final question, ask you if there's anything that you want to ask the Empress today, and I can pull a card if you like. Not that I'm the Empress you're asking, but we will ask the great Empress of the universe anything
Yeah.
you like.
Yeah. I think I'd like to ask the Empress what, yeah, I feel like I should have like a question at the ready, but something that's sort of in my mind and in my heart today is a little bit mushy, but I think I want to ask the Empress about finding peace in family. I think in a lot of ways, family can be so much work and also such a source of strength. And it's just so complicated. Like everybody's relationship with their families is so hard to navigate and also so important. So I guess I don't have a full out question, but I have a sort of one. I'm wondering about how we might find peace in our family life. And that's like, that goes for my family, like my household in particular.
Okay. Yeah, and I think that's it's probably a question many people are asking themselves many different points. And something that seems true in the spirit of interconnectedness, like working in a collective or moving as a collective means navigating all of these different perspectives and lived experiences and opinions and skill sets and egos and unhealed wounds, and the same is true in our family. And so when we lean into interconnectedness, we also have to bring an incredible amount of strength and patience and love for navigating that. And we've become such a kind of individualistic society that I think people are even more uh, braced against collective movement, even as much as we crave it, because it's biologically how we survive and how we thrive. Um, so, beautiful question. And the card I pulled is the Knight of Wands. And the wands are the fire element, and the knights are always on a journey, moving on a mission. And I associate this knight with the idea of adventure. And I think family, like sometimes it feels like maybe we're in a tragic comedy with our family, right? Like not your I'm not saying you feel that with your husband and your son, but maybe with our extended family, there are some parts of the family that feel fraught and absurd. And
Really.
like, do I really have to like endure this? And I think I've had someone tell me, I can't think of who, but some sort of teacher or like supporter, coach, energy worker person kind of share that like families, maybe we did kind of pick them on the before we came down to earth to live in this body. Like it feels like we just landed in this family, and we have to kind of navigate that and figure it out and do our best or pull away, or there's duty involved. But that it's such a teaching container for us. Like so much is we come to like form an identity against or aligned with the family members we have and the beliefs that they hold and the legacies they pass on. And I feel like this card is kind of asking us to see this element as just another adventure in life that we're on, like this great kind of like learning adventure where we don't get to pick the lessons always. And, it's not like a self-created curriculum where we would like, oh, I would like to learn this now and this. It's sort of like, oh, the family's doing this thing, this is going on. And so we're all kind of learning how to relate to each other and how to navigate this and to find the beauty or the peace or the fun or the funny in this difficulty. um or even when we don't feel super connected, sometimes the adventure is kind of like returning to each other or finding our way back. But I'm also curious, those are some scrambled thoughts.
Yeah.
I'm curious what you see.
Yeah. I mean, I definitely see the adventure part, but I look at the horse. That's like the thing I'm looking at. And I'm like, a horse has such a duty. Like there's so much duty and obligation, I think, involved. But I like to think, I don't know that this is true, but I like to think horses find joy in the obligation and the jobs that they have to do. But I also think there's sort of like the ability to kind of like leave it behind is the important part of the night, using the
Mhm.
horse as a tool, leave it aside and return to it when you need it. Yeah, but I really like the idea of adventure. Like family is forever, but at the same time, the phases of family change over time, and seeing it as something like you seek it out, and when you need peace, you sort of like move away from it.
Yeah. And, in a family, it's like every individual is on their own journey. And then the family as a unit is on a collective journey too. And how does the container of the family hold enough space for everyone to have their own adventure? And yeah, it's just like peace isn't always possible, but something maybe that can be located again after these moments of friction, or as people are kind of like figuring themselves out or going through something only they are experiencing intensely. And um, I like what you mentioned about the horse. And I do, we have kind of made them into animals of duty, but they're also incredibly emotional. And a horse can hear a
Yeah.
human heartbeat from like 4 feet away.
Oh my God.
Yeah. And they're incredibly, you can, co-regulate your nervous system with a horse that you're attuning to. And they can take you a long distance when you have that relationship. And I think as we work, like if a person's working with a horse, just the domination isn't going to work. It's like you have to, what kind of horse are you? How can I motivate you? How can you
Yeah.
trust me to care for you? And I think those are things too we have to uh, contend with in our family relationships for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. That's super resonant and a good way to think about it. Thank you.
Thank you for that great question that I imagine the Empress as well must ask herself sometimes. Is there anything I missed or anything you want to add or anything else on your heart or
I don't think
mind? Okay,
No, I don't think so. I feel very much explored and that I have done some exploring too.
good. I am so grateful that you came on the show to have this conversation with me. A garage door just closed below me, so I don't know how much sound of that came into the podcast. What I'm trying to say, Christina, is I'm so grateful that you are out in the world being a role model for, I think, the many active and latent empresses who are walking the planet. And, the work that you do with housing and activism and connecting the dots and making art and showing us what's possible in life in 2024 and the future is just incredibly inspiring. So thank you.
Yeah. Thank you for stewarding this conversation and just being such a kind human, connecting all of these dots for listeners and beyond.
Thank you. Thank you so much to Christina for coming on the show and sharing this beautiful conversation with us. I hope this exploration of the Empress has brought something delicious and inspiring to you in terms of nourishing your creative and magic life and connecting with the Empress and bringing more of her energy into your living creation that is you. You can go to the show notes to find all the different places you can connect with Christina and her work. You can find links to Power Switch Action, links to the Dots Home video game, which I encourage you to play and share, especially with young folks. You can find links to Christina's Instagram, where she showcases her sewing creations, all the pieces of clothing that she makes for herself. So check her out, follow her work, celebrate her. And then we'll close out this episode with a creative prompt for working with the Empress. So I want you to imagine that you have been given the keys to a secret garden for a full day, except a day isn't 24 hours. Like it's not a hard 24-hour day. This day is kind of like as long as you want it to be. It's a little more timeless. The time is a little more fluid. It's a little more stretchy. So, don't think of this in terms of like you only have 24 hours, but think of this as a day from like, the sun rising to the sun setting. And this secret garden has been specifically cultivated with you in mind. So it's got all the foods you love. It's got all the creative tools you may ever want to use. It's got a variety of luscious, beautiful spaces where you can create, where you can rest, where you can nourish yourself, where you can hang out with your friends, or you could ride your bike, you could climb a rock wall, like whatever you want to do and enjoy is in this secret garden. It's already there. So start imagining the secret garden, what it might look like. And then I want you to write down some of the things you would do over the course of this day, kind of breaking up the day into different sections. Like there's a morning time, there's a midday time, lunchtime ish, there's afternoon, then there's evening, and then there's late night. And so just let yourself imagine what you would enjoy, what you would do, what you would create. How would you spend your time in this extended day inside this secret garden that is just for you? And then I also want you to draw an image that either reflects the entrance to the garden or the keys you found that will get you inside the garden or one of the spaces in the garden that you particularly like. So I encourage you to kind of sit and really ruminate and imagine, close your eyes, take yourself on a path that leads to this garden, hold the keys in your hand and unlock the door and or the gate and notice what the door or the gate or the portal is like, and then walk inside and notice the energy of the space, notice the temperature, notice the smells, notice what's around you, and then start to meander and walk around and discover and see what's there. And then you can come into this prompt of describing how you would spend your extended day in this space. And that's your prompt for the Empress. It's meant to help you connect with this bountiful sense of creativity and possibility and a spaciousness for you to enjoy and do things at your own pace and your own rhythm according to your own desire. So I hope you'll work with that prompt. Let me know how it goes. You can always reach out and share anything about this podcast or tarot or life. You can find me at hello@typewritertarot.com. And if you enjoyed this episode, I hope you'll share it with a friend. I hope you'll maybe leave a rating, subscribe to the show, leave a review. That would be awesome. And then we'll close. I just want to give some special thanks to Chantal DeFelice, who created the beautiful sounds for this episode and who has edited this episode and put it all together. Thank you, Chantal. Chantal is also accepting new work as a sound designer and as a visual artist and more. And you can find her in the show notes as well if you want to check out her work. And then special thanks as well to Ami Plas for creating the podcast logo. Thank y'all. It's so wonderful to be in community with creative people and to have amazing collaborations like this. And I'm wishing all the same for everyone out there. So until next time, enjoy your creative and magical life.